A terrifying true story. Experienced by a Korean cram school teacher that day was no different. I was simply on my way home after finishing late-night self-study. Although that kind of atmosphere has faded quite a bit nowadays, back when I was in high school, nighttime self-study known as yaja was pretty much mandatory. If you said, "I'm not doing it," you'd immediately be called in for a counseling session. There was this unspoken pressure that if you stood out in a bad way, your school life would instantly become a massive headache. So it was just a given for me to stay at school until 10 p.m. and take the bus back home. Our house wasn't in the city center, but rather out on the edge of town, up in the mountains. My mother longed for a life in the countryside, so we ended up building and living in a log cabin-style house deep in the mountains. During the day, the path up there was truly beautiful. There were plenty of trees, you could spot small animals like squirrels, and the air was so crisp. But at night, that path showed a completely different face. Especially that narrow mountain trail leading to my house from the final bus stop. Without any lights, you literally couldn't see a single thing in front of you. That day, as usual, the bus was practically empty. I got off by myself at the final stop. And back then, I had one little thing I was proud of. It was right around the time when MP3 players were just starting to become popular, and I owned one of those iRiver MP3 players that you hung around your neck. With that hanging from my neck and earphones plugged in, I would always walk around listening to music. I still remember the song I had on repeat that night. It was Missing You by Fly to the Sky. After getting off at the final stop and walking for about 15 minutes, the entrance to the mountain would come into view. From that point on, it was a narrow single trail leading into the mountains. My mother, always worried about me walking the night road alone, had paid out of her own pocket to build a small wooden staircase path for me. On top of that, she had installed small lampposts at regular intervals along the way. So, under normal circumstances, it wasn't supposed to be pitch black. Yet for some strange reason that night, not a single lamppost was lit. Back then, I didn't even own a cell phone. I couldn't just call home like people do now to say, "The lights are all out." So, with no other choice, I just thought, let's just get home fast. With that in mind, I turned up the volume of my music and kept walking. Somewhere along the mountain path, I think it was around the third section, at that moment, with absolutely no warning whatsoever, something brushed against my back. To be precise, it was a finger. For some reason, the exact shape of that hand remains vividly clear in my memory. Only the index finger was extended straight out while the other fingers were loosely curled inwards. That hand came down with a soft thud onto my back. And then, I felt the tip of that index finger slowly scratch down my spine. I froze right then and there. You'd think that when people get scared, they yell or immediately run away. But when you are truly terrified, you paralyze. Your body just locks up completely, as if your breath has been stolen away. Standing dead in my tracks, I tried desperately to rationalize it in my head. This could just be a branch. My clothes are thick, maybe it just happened to brush past me. But deep down, I knew it didn't make sense. The sensation felt far too much like an actual hand. So I decided I would count to 3 in my head and then suddenly whip around. 1, 2, 3. As I whipped around, I swung my arm out wide just in case. I even kicked out into the empty air with my foot. I thought that if someone was standing right behind me like in a movie, I wanted to hit them. But there was nothing there. Absolutely nothing. At that exact moment, what surged inside me before fear could even take hold was an indescribable sense of emptiness and an almost unbelievable wave of sheer embarrassment. What on earth was I just doing? I scanned my surroundings. The mountain path blanketed with fallen leaves, the sound of the wind, the music leaking from my earphones, and nothing but the pitch-black darkness. I forced myself to rationalize it. I'm just tired. Maybe I've been running low on stamina lately. Let's just get home and rest. I put my earphones back in and started walking again. But before I could even take a few steps, that sensation hit me yet again. This time, it was far more distinct. The feeling of fingers pressing against my back, shaped in that exact same hand position from before. Except this time, it wasn't just a single index finger. It felt like two fingers scratching down my spine at the exact same time. Scratch. Scratch. It felt as though two distinct lines were scraping heavily right down my back. I couldn't bring myself to lift my head. Unable to even look straight ahead, I kept my eyes clamped shut, burying my face downward. And then, I just started running like a madman. I was someone who genuinely loathed exercising. I hated sweating, and I absolutely hated catching my breath. But in that exact moment, some unbelievable strength surged out of my body. Fueled by nothing but the desperate thought, I need to survive. I bolted blindly down the mountain path. And then, my foot caught on something. I tripped over something and took a nasty, heavy fall. Sprawled out on the ground, panting desperately for breath, the very first thing I did was whip my head around to look behind me. Did it catch me? Is this the end for me? But just as before, there was absolutely nothing there. I tried to stand back up, but my legs had turned to jelly and simply wouldn't support my weight. So I just ended up slumping down right there, sitting cross-legged on the ground. At that moment, the true terror began. I had absolutely no idea where I was. I knew for sure that I had started running from the path I always took, but I had been so desperately frantic that I hadn't paid any attention to which direction I was heading. Surrounding me was nothing but deep, dense woods. There wasn't a single light in sight. Let alone another human being, there were no houses, no roads, absolutely nothing. Aside from the crunching sound of my own footsteps on the fallen leaves, there was nothing else to prove that I was alive. At that instant, my mind went completely blank and a whole different wave of dread washed over me. Whether it's a ghost or a criminal, that's not what's important right now. I can't get home, and I have no way to contact anyone. I might actually die out here. In the midst of wandering, my bag broke as well. The shoulder strap snapped right off, and since I was entirely consumed by the urge to escape, I couldn't even manage to properly pick it up and take it with me. For a while, I walked frantically, trying to find a path. I had no idea how long I had been walking. Whether it had been 10 minutes or 30 minutes, my sense of time had completely vanished. After a while, all of a sudden, I spotted a single faint light off in the distance. The moment I saw that light, the thought "I'm saved" flashed through my mind. There's a light. That means people live there. I started walking, keeping my eyes fixed on that light. I walked and I walked and I kept walking. But something was wrong. No matter how much I walked, the light didn't seem to get any closer. I knew that being deep in the mountains could warp your sense of distance, but this was unnatural. This time, I couldn't even manage to run with wide strides like before. My stamina was already completely depleted, my legs refused to give me any leverage, and my entire body was trembling uncontrollably. Even so, keeping my eyes locked solely on that distant light, I ran with my head down. I flailed my arms as if desperately clawing through the empty air, looking at nothing but the ground beneath me, running until my breath felt like it was about to give out entirely. And then I tripped again. My foot caught on something like a rock and my body pitched forward into a hard dive. At that exact instant, I blacked out. Yet, even as I was losing consciousness, there was something deeply bizarre. Normally, when you fall like that, you're supposed to feel the jarring impact of your head hitting the ground. However, my head never actually touched the dirt. Instead, it felt as though my head hit something like a wall, bending at an unnatural angle, upon impact. I felt a sensation of my neck snapping almost 90 degrees as it struck something solid. After that, I have no further memory. When I next opened my eyes, my surroundings were faintly lit. It was morning. And from somewhere nearby, I heard human voices. "Where are you? Are you over there?" The moment I heard those voices, I thought with absolute certainty, I'm finally saved. I gathered every last ounce of strength left in my body and screamed, "I'm over here." Right away, a few people came rushing over toward me, and right behind them was my mother. She had spent the entire night gathering people to search the mountain for me. She told me that I hadn't come home when I was supposed to and that someone had found what looked like my bag out in the woods. That was when she realized something terrible had happened and initiated the search. The moment I saw my mother's face, a rush of relief and pent-up frustration washed over me all at once. I threw my arms around her and broke down sobbing right then and there. Once we got back home, I told her everything I had experienced exactly as it happened. But at first, my mother didn't believe me. She asked, "Has something been bothering you lately?" She even said, "Could it be that the stress made you see things?" I felt so frustrated and wronged that I snapped. "Are you saying I lost my mind and did all that to myself out in the woods? Do you think I wanted to come home late on purpose?" When I said that, my mother looked straight into my eyes, seemingly sensing that something was genuinely wrong. And that was when my mother, for the very first time, called a mudang a Korean shaman. Our family had always been completely disconnected from that kind of spiritual world. We didn't follow any specific religion, and my father despised that sort of thing in particular. So, deciding to call a mudang was a massive step for my mother to take. A few days later, a male shaman, a Paksu, arrived. Standing at the entrance of the mountain, he took just one brief look around the area, and his expression instantly froze. Then, he spoke to my mother in a quiet, low voice. This is not something within my scale to handle. There are far too many of them here. Do you have any idea just how many are lingering in this place?" My mother said that hearing those words made a cold sweat break out all over her. The Paksu told her that he would recommend someone else he knew who was more capable. He added that he wouldn't take a single dime for a referral fee. "I'm only doing this because I want to see this young man make it out of this okay." Leaving those words behind, he wrote down a contact number and left. After that, we were told, "Do not live in that house anymore. Something has attached itself to him now. It will keep following him wherever he goes. If you continue to live together in this house, even you, the parents, will be in danger." So, for a while, we lived out of a motel-like place. About 2 weeks later, another mudang arrived. This time, it was an old woman. Her back was bent, and she walked incredibly slowly. Her eyes looked as though they were almost completely closed. Yet, the moment I saw that old woman, for some reason, I was the one who became utterly terrified. She was scarier to me than any ghost. Before even hearing the details of what happened, the exact moment she laid eyes on me, she opened her half-closed eyes wide and stroked my head. And she uttered just a single line. "You survived. You are still alive." Those words were chilling to the bone. After listening to the whole story from my mother, the old woman said shortly, "Let's go." But it wasn't just a simple trick of the mind. I was absolutely certain that I was walking straight toward that light. Yet the light remained at the exact same distance the entire time, as if it were doing nothing but staring right back at me. Right then, a sound came from behind. Crunch. Crunch. It was the exact same sound my own feet made whenever I stepped on the fallen leaves. At first, I tried to tell myself I was just hearing things. So, I picked up my pace just a little bit. crunch, crunch, crunch. Then, from right behind me, at the exact same tempo, crunch, crunch, crunch. At that exact moment, my entire body went ice cold. It's following me. I started running again. Off in the distance, I spotted a single, faint light. The moment I saw that light, the thought "I'm saved" flashed through my mind. There's a light. That means people live there. I walked, keeping my eyes fixed on that light. I walked and I walked and I kept walking. But something was wrong. No matter how much I walked, the light didn't seem to get any closer. I knew that being deep in the mountains could warp your sense of distance, but this was unnatural. After that, we began climbing the mountain path. At the entrance, she took a single, quick look around the mountain just like the Paksu had done earlier, and then she clicked her tongue. And then, she suddenly struck my mother. Out of nowhere, she landed a sharp, heavy slap right across my mother's back. Without missing a beat, she spat out in anger, "Who in their right mind builds a house to live in a god-forsaken place like this?" My mind was a complete and utter mess that day. The old woman said, "We don't have time for long chats. You two, get away from this place right now. I will clean this up. Don't do anything reckless." With that, she turned around and walked up the mountain path all by herself. I still remember her retreating figure vividly to this day. Never in my life had a person's back looked so incredibly reliable. For the next few days, we weren't allowed to enter the house. While the old woman was doing her work, we stayed somewhere else. On the day it finally ended, she came back down the mountain. After having a long conversation with my mother, she said, "I want to see the boy separately." I met the old woman downstairs, away from the house. She looked at me and said, "Listen to me very carefully. You are incredibly lucky. If you weren't, you would have been dead a long time ago." Even hearing those words, I couldn't quite believe it. However, the old woman knew the exact details of what I had experienced with eerie accuracy. She spoke as if she had been right there on the scene, watching the whole thing happen. And crucially, that sensation I felt when I fell, the feeling of my head never touching the ground, but hitting something like a wall at an unnatural angle. The old woman brought up that exact moment. "Your neck snapped into the shape of a V right there, didn't it? There used to be an old well site at that exact spot." It was only then that I truly understood, deep down in my bones, that none of it had been a coincidence. The old woman continued, "There are many children who died there harboring deep resentment. Young women in particular. Those things have absolutely no interest in your mother. They latch onto young ones like you. They just want to play. If you intend to keep living here, make protecting your own life your top priority. This is as far as I can protect you." Hearing those words, I had no choice but to nod in silence. It was absolutely terrifying. Far more than the ghost story itself, it was the old woman's absolute certainty that was deeply frightening. After hearing that, my mother started tracking down anyone who had lived in that town for a long time, searching far and wide. Eventually, she managed to find an elderly person who had been born and raised in that area and was now living alone. At first, that person refused to speak a single word about it. But my mother kept visiting, bowing her head and begging over and over again until they finally opened up. The elderly local said bluntly, "That is a place where human beings are never meant to live." And the story my mother was told turned out to be far more brutal. Back during the Korean War, the 625 War, there was an armed guerrilla group hiding out deep inside that mountain. They said that during their retreat, a horrific tragedy befell the surrounding villages. Most of the men were slaughtered, the helpless villagers were taken hostage, and several of them disappeared without a trace near that old well site. That horrific history, It lined up perfectly, without a single missing detail, with the old well site the shaman had mentioned. That was the point where an even deeper, bone-chilling dread washed over me. I was absolutely certain that I had seen a light and that I had been running directly toward it. Yet when we checked the area later, aside from our own house, there was virtually no place where a light could possibly be inside that entire mountain. Despite that, I had undeniably seen a light. What's more, that light had never allowed me to get any closer to it until the very end. On top of that, the old well site where I was found unconscious was a massive distance away from our house. Exactly how I had managed to travel all the way out there was something completely impossible to explain. But the thing that made my blood run entirely cold was what the old woman had said. If you had taken just another 100 meters forward, you would have never been able to come back. It was only then that I finally understood. The thing that saved me that day was the very fact that I tripped and fell. That split second when my foot caught on a protruding root and sent me crashing down was what had severed the hold they had on me. In the end, we left that house behind. But the real problem was, there was absolutely no one willing to buy it. Back in the early 2000s, it was a time when everyone was genuinely terrified of leaving the city center to move deep into the mountains. Because of that, we had to sell it at a staggering, devastating loss. To give you an idea of the scale, it was like putting a house that cost 1 billion won to build on the market for just 200 million won. The house was such a lost cause that it was nearly impossible to find anyone willing to take it off our hands. And that was how we finally left that mountain behind. And to this day, I never listen to music with earphones on my way back home. Even a soft gust of wind makes me feel a sudden, freezing chill right down my spine. Because the sensation of those fingers, the ones that latched onto my back on that mountain path, remains terrifyingly vivid even now. And if I were to add one more thing, I've experienced several other bizarre incidents ever since that night. Once, an item connected to a murder case dug up near my house, bringing the police to my doorstep. I often found myself placed on the periphery of those kinds of grim events at the strangest times. I wouldn't go as far as to say that I can actually see ghosts. Even so, there are things in this world that simply cannot be explained. On that dark mountain path that night, I undeniably felt fingers on my back. And those fingers, on 2 distinct occasions, scratched right down my bare back in the middle of the absolute pitch-black void.